Okay, so today we're going to be talking about my most anticipated movie of 2023, Resident Evil Death Island. Yep, it wasn't John Wick 4, it wasn't Across the Spider-Verse, it wasn't Barbie. As quite a big Resident Evil fan, it was Resident Evil Death Island. Now this movie only had theatrical releases in certain regions in early July, in all others it goes straight to home video and digital on July 25th. I actually got the chance to attend the American premiere of this movie in LA a few weeks prior to that. Going into the screening room, I was literally walking by the director, writer, producer, voice cast. After the movie was over, they did a Q&A. I was surrounded by awesome fellow Resident Evil fans, so I saw this movie probably in the most thrilling context possible. With that in mind, I'm gonna say this is one of the best, if not the best Resident Evil film of all time. Granted, the bar is set very low to begin with. Aside from maybe the first Paul W.S. Anderson movie, the live-action adaptations are pretty atrocious. If somewhat faithful, watchable Resident Evil films are what you seek, your best bet are the CGI animated movies as they're canonical to the video games and feature the actual video game characters. Resident Evil Death Island is the 5th installment of the animated Resident Evil series, and the reason why I was really looking forward to this one is because it assembles all the prominent Resident Evil heroes. We have Chris, Leon, Jill, Claire, Rebecca. The first act has us follow each character as they deal with their own separate cases, which all eventually converge on the same location, Alcatraz Prison, the Death Island. It's an Avengers-style movie within the Resident Evil universe, and I think that concept was executed fairly well. This is a fun, action-filled adventure with a substantial amount of fan service and comedy mixed into it. It was mentioned in the Q&A that they wanted to ramp up the comedy for this movie, which sounds like an MCU move, but it doesn't feel forced. The jokes are entirely derived from the character's charisma. Leon by now is known to make witty remarks and corny one-liners, and he continues to do so here. By the way, this is also the first time he and Jill meet face to face, and their banter is amazing. Hands down the best character interaction in the movie. Chris and Ada would be upset. I do want to say though that I don't think this movie did the best job in balancing the screen time between each character. Rebecca is kind of sidelined here, doesn't have very much to do, which I get because she is the least popular out of the 5 characters. If you're a Rebecca fan, just know you might be a little disappointed in that regard. I remember a common criticism of Resident Evil Infinite Darkness was how it disgracefully treated Claire's character. She was mostly used as expedition dumps there and ended up being the damsel in distress during the climax when it's been established that she's a very capable character. The Claire fans were furious. Fortunately, Claire is much better portrayed in this movie. You see her as a badass that she truly is. She's certainly more involved than Rebecca, but not quite as much as Chris, Leon, and Jill. They are the big 3. Even the cover art on the Steelbook edition of this movie says so. Personally, I didn't really mind this because they're my favorite characters, but if they were gonna give certain characters more attention than others, I wish Jill was pushed a little further to the forefront because this didn't quite feel like her movie when it should have. She does demonstrate the most emotional depth out of all the protagonists, but I didn't find it to be enough. The idea of Death Island wasn't just to have all the iconic characters band together, but to also celebrate Jill Valentine's return. This is the first time we see her in action following Resident Evil 5, which came out in 2009, and although the first act does explore the burden of guilt she carries due to the events of RE5, it kinda gets dropped as the movie progresses. I kinda had the exact same problem with RE3 remake where it touches on her trauma from the events of the Spencer Mansion in the opening sequence, but then it doesn't explore it any further afterwards. Now, as for the villain of this movie, I'd say he's one of the more intriguing human villains we've gotten in this Resident Evil animated series, but that's not necessarily due to his character. His character from design to personality actually couldn't be more bland. Even his ultimate goal of releasing a deadly virus onto the world as an act of vengeance and to make the world a better place is beyond original at this point. It was more of his backstory and motivation that made him stand out from the others. After being wronged by a higher power in the past, he ultimately came to the realization that there is no justice in the world, and he makes some really solid points supporting that philosophy by detracting each of our heroes. This may be a minor spoiler, but also something you may miss while watching the movie, so I'm gonna give you a heads up on it. If you don't want any spoilers, you can skip to this time right here. Okay, so there is a bit of storytelling behind the opening credits. It may seem like it's just showcasing each protagonist in the movie along with a few glimpses of their past experiences, but that is actually the villain going through the data. So he knows quite a lot about each one of them. He criticizes Leon for having made relational cover-ups as a government agent, particularly in Resident Evil Infinite Darkness, and this was something that even Claire didn't quite agree with, so there is some right to that judgment. He even points out how Chris's team always gets killed, but he continues to bring in more people as replacement. As Resident Evil fans, we've known that that's been a thing, so I appreciate this movie finally addressing it. Our antagonist is definitely onto something, but in the end, his actions are a bit too extreme and even hypocritical at times to make him a complex, sympathetic villain. And that's completely fine. This didn't need to be mind-provoking cinema. It's a Resident Evil movie. The main selling point here is bringing the beloved RE heroes on screen together for a mindlessly entertaining action film, and it is certainly fulfilling in that aspect. The performances by the cast are also great, although the voice acting could be stiff at times, especially due to some really cheesy dialogue, but then again, this is a Resident Evil movie. If you're a fan who's been keeping up with the games, this is absolutely worth the watch. Being my most anticipated movie of the year, I had pretty high expectations for it, and it managed to make me walk away with a big smile. Granted, once again, I did come out of the premiere, and that is a very exciting context under which to see a movie. That's gonna be it for me on Resident Evil Death Island. If you've seen the movie already, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. Love to hear what y'all think. In the future, I also plan on ranking all of the Resident Evil CG projects. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, stay tuned and I'll see you then. Later.